What if I told you that discovering your husband's darkest secrets on Reddit could transform you into a billionaire CEO he'd never dare abandon? Stop scrolling for just 30 seconds, because what I'm about to share will completely flip everything you think you know about marriage, betrayal, and the kind of power that changes everything. Have you ever felt like you're living with a complete stranger? Like the person sleeping next to you every night is hiding an entire universe of thoughts, fears, and confessions that they'd rather share with anonymous internet users than with you? Well, that's exactly what happened to the woman in today's story. Except her discovery didn't destroy her marriage. It made her absolutely irreplaceable. This isn't your typical husband cheats, wife leaves drama. This is about a woman who found her husband pouring his deepest vulnerabilities onto Reddit, confessing feelings he'd never shared with her, admitting to emotional connections that threatened their foundation, and revealing doubts about their marriage that cut her to the core. But instead of letting it break her, she used that digital betrayal as fuel to build something extraordinary. If you've ever questioned whether you really know your partner, whether behind their loving smile and supportive words, they're living a completely different emotional reality, hit that like button right now, because this story is going to shake you. Meet our protagonist. Let's call her Alexandra. Brilliant, driven, and absolutely devoted to building her sustainable tech startup from the ground up. She was the kind of woman who could command a boardroom by day and still come home to cook dinner with her husband Oliver, discussing everything from market strategies to their weekend plans. They seemed to have it all figured out. Oliver was her perfect match, or so she believed. A talented software engineer with a quick wit and the kind of steady presence that made her feel grounded when her entrepreneurial world got chaotic. They'd fallen fast and hard, moving in together within months of meeting, then sealing their love with a beautiful ceremony surrounded by everyone who mattered. Life felt balanced, purposeful, and secure. But here's what Alexandra didn't know. While she was building her empire, Oliver was building a secret digital life. While she was sharing her business victories and challenges with him every evening, he was sharing his deepest fears and marriage struggles with strangers on Reddit. While she believed they had honest, open communication, he was confessing to thousands of anonymous users that he felt trapped, inadequate, and emotionally starving in their relationship. The woman who thought she knew everything about her husband was about to discover that sometimes the people closest to us are the greatest mysteries of all. Have you ever had that moment where something seems off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That feeling where your instincts are screaming that something's wrong, but your logical mind keeps pushing those concerns away? Alexandra was about to learn that those instincts are usually right, and that sometimes the most devastating discoveries lead to the most incredible transformations. Because what started as a routine late-night Reddit scroll would expose not just Oliver's hidden emotional world, but her own blind spots as a wife and partner. It would force her to confront uncomfortable truths about success, ambition, and what it really means to be present in a marriage. And ultimately, it would transform her from a successful startup founder into a billionaire CEO with the kind of personal power that makes her absolutely indispensable. This isn't just a story about finding your spouse's secrets online. This is about a woman who discovered that her greatest crisis would become her greatest catalyst. It's about the moment when betrayal becomes breakthrough, when digital confessions become real-life connections, and when a wife transforms into the kind of woman her husband couldn't survive losing. Do you know someone who's been through a relationship crisis that seemed like the end of everything, only to emerge stronger than ever? Or maybe you've experienced that moment when you realized that your partner was struggling in ways you never understood. Share this video with them, because what you're about to hear proves that sometimes our darkest moments are actually doorways to our most powerful selves. Ready to find out how a devastating Reddit discovery transformed a marriage and created a CEO who now holds all the cards? Let's get started. 2 years earlier, Alexandra had been convinced she'd hit the relationship jackpot. Oliver wasn't just handsome. Though his easy smile and sharp jawline didn't hurt, he was genuinely fascinating. While other guys her age were still figuring out their basic life goals, Oliver had this quiet confidence about him, like he'd already mapped out exactly who he wanted to be. Their first date lasted 14 hours. Not because they planned it that way, but because neither of them wanted it to end. They started with coffee at 10 a.m., moved to lunch, then a bookstore, then dinner, then a late-night walk through the city where they talked about everything from artificial intelligence to their childhood fears. By the time Oliver walked her to her apartment door, Alexandra knew she was in trouble. The best kind of trouble. "I've never met anyone who thinks about the world the way you do," he'd told her, and she believed him completely. Because the feeling was mutual. Within 3 months, they were practically living together. Within 6 months, it was official. Oliver's coding setup merged seamlessly with Alexandra's home office chaos. His neat, organized desk a perfect complement to her creative storm of sticky notes, whiteboards, and prototype sketches scattered everywhere. They were the couple everyone envied. The kind who could work in comfortable silence, then break into spontaneous debates about whether sustainable technology could actually save the world. Oliver would code late into the night while Alexandra perfected her business plans, occasionally sharing snacks or quick kisses when one of them got stuck on a problem. "We're like a perfectly calibrated machine," Alexandra used to joke with her friends. "He handles the technical brilliance, I handle the big vision stuff, and somehow we make each other better at everything." Their wedding was exactly what they'd both wanted: intimate, meaningful, and completely focused on their commitment rather than impressing anyone else. 43 guests, a ceremony in Alexandra's childhood backyard, and vows they'd written together that made everyone cry. Oliver's best man had toasted them as the couple who proves that soulmates aren't just fairy tale nonsense. And for the first year of marriage, it really did feel like they'd cracked the code on partnership. Alexandra's sustainable tech company was gaining momentum. She'd secured her first round of funding and was attracting attention from major investors who loved her vision for environmentally conscious innovation. Oliver celebrated every milestone like it was his own victory, staying up late to help her prepare for presentations and offering to handle all the household responsibilities during her most intense work periods. "I married a future billionaire," he'd say proudly, and Alexandra would laugh and remind him that he was equally ambitious, equally brilliant, and equally destined for success. But success has a way of shifting dynamics, even in the strongest relationships. As Alexandra's company grew from a promising startup to a legitimate business with real employees, real deadlines, and real pressure, her days became longer and more demanding. Investor calls at 7 a.m., followed by product development meetings, then team management issues, then late-night strategy sessions that sometimes stretched past midnight. Oliver was endlessly supportive, but gradually, their perfectly calibrated machines started running on different schedules. Alexandra would come home energized and wanting to share every detail of her day, while Oliver, who'd been handling his own demanding projects all day, just wanted to decompress quietly. Or Oliver would be excited about a coding breakthrough he'd achieved, but Alexandra's mind would still be racing with tomorrow's investor presentation. They still loved each other deeply, but somewhere along the way, they'd stopped being each other's primary source of energy and started becoming each other's secondary priority. "How was your day?" became a routine question with routine answers. "Fine, just the usual chaos," or "Good, got a lot done." They were sharing space and responsibilities, but fewer and fewer of those long, meandering conversations that had defined their early relationship. Neither of them recognized it as a problem. They were just busy, successful people building their careers and their life together. This was what adult love looked like, right? Comfortable, stable, supportive, even if it wasn't quite as intensely connected as those early days. Alexandra's friends still considered them relationship goals. They had their systems down. Oliver handled grocery shopping and meal planning. Alexandra managed their finances and social calendar. They attended each other's work events, supported each other's professional goals, and maintained the kind of partnership that looked effortless from the outside. But comfort can be dangerous when it starts masking disconnection. And success can be isolating when it creates imbalances that neither partner fully acknowledges. Looking back, Alexandra would realize that they'd been slowly becoming strangers who shared a mortgage and a bed. Not because they'd stopped loving each other, but because they'd stopped prioritizing the kind of vulnerable, honest communication that had made them fall in love in the first place. What they both needed was a wake-up call that would force them to confront how far they'd drifted. What they were about to get was exactly that, in the most unexpected way possible. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when Alexandra's world shifted forever. She'd just finished a grueling day of back-to-back investor meetings, her brain still buzzing with financial projections and growth strategies. Oliver had already gone to bed. He'd been asleep when she got home at 10:30, which had become their new normal. A quick kiss on his forehead, and she'd retreated to the living room with her laptop to wind down. Reddit had become her guilty pleasure during these late-night decompression sessions. Nothing too deep, Just random threads about startup life, funny work stories, maybe some relationship advice posts that made her feel grateful for her solid marriage. It was mindless scrolling that helped her brain transition from business mode to sleep mode. But tonight, one post stopped her cold. The title was innocuous enough. "I'm living a double life, and the guilt is destroying me." Posted in one of those confession subreddits where people anonymously share their darkest secrets. Usually, these posts were about hidden addictions or workplace drama. The kind of thing you read, shake your head at, then scroll past. But something about this one felt different. Familiar. I've been married for 2 years to an amazing woman who's building something incredible with her life. Everyone thinks we're the perfect couple, and in many ways we are. She's brilliant, driven, and completely devoted to her work, which I've always supported, even when it means she's working until midnight most nights. Alexandra's scrolling finger paused. The writing style felt oddly recognizable, but she kept reading. "The problem is I feel invisible. Not because she doesn't love me, but because her success is so consuming that I've become background noise in her life. We still have good days, but most of the time, I feel like I'm married to her schedule rather than to her. And the worst part? I can't tell her any of this because I don't want to be the unsupportive husband who resents his wife's ambitions." Her heart rate quickened. This was probably just coincidence. Lots of couples dealt with career-focused partners. But she couldn't stop reading. "Last month, I started talking to someone at work. Nothing physical happened, but there were conversations that felt more intimate than anything I've had with my wife in months. This person actually listened when I talked about my own projects, remembered details about my life, asked follow-up questions about things that mattered to me. For a few weeks, I looked forward to those conversations more than I looked forward to going home." Alexandra's hands started trembling. The timeline matched. The details were getting too specific, too personal. "I ended it before anything happened, but I can't shake the guilt. Not just about the emotional connection, but about how good it felt to be seen and heard by someone. My wife thinks everything is fine between us, and I let her believe that because I don't know how to tell her that I'm drowning in our perfect life. This wasn't coincidence. This was too close to her reality, too aligned with Oliver's work situation, too perfectly matched to their recent dynamic. But she needed to be sure. Her fingers moved frantically, clicking on the username, scrolling through months of post history. Most of it was technical stuff, coding questions, software recommendations, discussions about remote work challenges. Normal Oliver topics. Then she found it. A comment from 3 weeks ago about living in the Pacific Northwest and working for a small tech consultancy that focuses on social impact apps. Oliver's exact job description. In Oliver's exact location. Another comment about my wife's sustainable technology startup getting featured in a major business magazine last month. That had happened. Alexandra's company had been featured in Forbes exactly 4 weeks ago. The writing style, the specific details, the timeline, everything matched. But the final confirmation came in a comment where he mentioned, "Celebrating our 2nd wedding anniversary next month by staying in that cabin where we had our first weekend getaway." They'd booked that exact cabin for their anniversary trip. A cabin they'd never talked about with anyone else. This was Oliver, her supportive, devoted husband. The man who celebrated her victories like his own. The partner who seemed genuinely proud of her success and never showed any signs of resentment or disconnection. He'd been pouring his heart out to strangers on the internet, confessing feelings he'd never shared with her, admitting to an emotional affair she knew nothing about, and revealing that their perfect marriage felt suffocating to him. Alexandra sat frozen in her living room, laptop screen glowing, while her husband slept peacefully 20 feet away. The man she thought she knew completely had been living an entirely different emotional reality, and she'd been completely oblivious. How long had he been feeling this way? How many nights had he come to bed frustrated or lonely while she worked late, assuming he understood and supported her ambitions? How many conversations had they had where he'd hidden his true feelings behind supportive smiles and encouraging words? Drop a comment if you've ever had to play detective in your own relationship, because what Alexandra was about to discover would force her to question everything she thought she knew about love, marriage, and the stories we tell ourselves about the people closest to us. But here's what she didn't know yet. This devastating discovery was about to become the catalyst for the most powerful transformation of her life. Because sometimes the truth that breaks your heart is exactly what you need to build something unbreakable. What she discovered next would change everything she thought she knew about the man sleeping next to her. And more importantly, everything she thought she knew about herself. Alexandra spent the next hour going down a rabbit hole she never wanted to explore, but couldn't abandon. Each click revealed another layer of Oliver's hidden emotional world, and each discovery felt like a small betrayal building into something massive. His posts painted a picture of a man slowly suffocating in his own life. Not because he was unhappy, but because he felt like he was disappearing. Does anyone else feel like they're becoming invisible in their own relationship? Read one post from 6 months ago. My wife is incredible. She's building something that could actually change the world. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being her partner and started being her support system. I celebrate her wins. I handle the logistics so she can focus on work. I listen to her problems and offer solutions. But when's the last time she asked about my dreams? When's the last time she seemed genuinely curious about what I'm working on? The post had dozens of responses. Other husbands sharing similar stories, offering advice, creating a whole community around feeling secondary in their own marriages. Oliver had been part of ongoing conversations for months, building relationships with strangers who understood his frustration in ways Alexandra apparently never had. Another post from 4 months ago. I love my wife more than anything, but I'm starting to resent her success. Not because I don't want her to succeed, but because her success seems to require my invisibility. Every conversation becomes about her company, her investors, her challenges. I've stopped sharing my own project updates because I can see her eyes glaze over when I talk about anything that isn't directly related to her world. Alexandra's stomach clenched. She remembered those conversations. She remembered cutting Oliver off mid-sentence when he was explaining a coding breakthrough because she'd just remembered an urgent email she needed to send. She remembered nodding along to his work stories while mentally rehearsing her next presentation. But the worst part was reading about the emotional affair she knew nothing about. Her name is Jessica, and she's the project manager for our biggest client. Oliver had written 2 months ago. Started as normal work conversations, but she actually listens when I talk. She asks follow-up questions about my ideas. She remembers things I tell her about my life. Yesterday, she asked how my anniversary dinner went, and I realized my own wife never asked about my experience of that night. Just whether I'd made the reservation and picked up her dress from the dry cleaner. Alexandra remembered that anniversary dinner. She'd been distracted by a crisis with one of her investors, checking her phone throughout the meal, handling the evening like another item on her to-do list rather than a celebration of their relationship. I know I'm heading toward dangerous territory, Oliver had continued. Jessica and I have started texting outside of work hours. Nothing inappropriate, but conversations that feel more connected than anything I have at home. She sent me a funny article yesterday and said it reminded her of something I'd mentioned weeks ago. When's the last time my wife remembered something random I said and thought of me later? The emotional affair had lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of increasingly personal conversations, shared jokes, and the kind of attention Oliver was starving for at home. He'd ended it abruptly, posting about the experience with raw honesty. I stopped it before anything physical happened, but I feel like I already cheated. Not because of what we did, but because of how much better those conversations felt than the ones I have with the woman I married. That's the real betrayal, that I found emotional intimacy with someone else because I'd given up on finding it with my wife. Reading this, Alexandra felt a complex storm of emotions she couldn't separate. Anger that he'd shared their private struggles with strangers. Betrayal that he'd formed a connection with another woman. Humiliation that dozens of Reddit users knew more about her marriage problems than she did. But underneath all of that was something unexpected. Recognition. Because as she read Oliver's posts, she saw their relationship from his perspective for the first time. And what she saw was a woman so consumed with building her empire that she'd forgotten to maintain the partnership that made her feel strong enough to build it in the first place. I feel like I'm married to her ambition rather than to her, Oliver had written just last week. And the crazy part is, I fell in love with that ambition. I wanted to be the partner who supported her dreams. But somewhere along the way, supporting her dreams meant abandoning my own identity. I'm not her husband anymore. I'm her personal assistant who happens to sleep in her bed. Have you ever realized you were both the victim and the problem in a relationship crisis? Because that's exactly what Alexandra was experiencing as she read post after post of her husband's emotional truth. She was the victim of his deception, his emotional affair, his decision to confess to strangers rather than communicate with her directly. But she was also the problem, the partner who'd become so focused on external success that she'd neglected the relationship that made that success meaningful. Oliver's most recent post, from just 3 days ago, was the most devastating. I love her too much to leave, and I respect her too much to ask her to choose between me and her dreams. So I'm stuck in this weird limbo where I'm grateful for what we have but grieving for what we've lost. She's becoming everything she wanted to be, and I'm proud of her. But I'm disappearing in the process, and I don't know how to tell her that without sounding like the selfish husband who wants to hold back his successful wife. Sitting in her living room at 1:30 a.m., laptop screen reflecting off her tear-streaked face, Alexandra realized that her perfect marriage had been falling apart for months while she'd been too busy succeeding to notice. But here's what she didn't know yet. This moment of devastating clarity was about to become the foundation for rebuilding something stronger than what they'd lost. Because sometimes the truth that breaks your heart is exactly what you need to create the love that makes you unbreakable. The question was, what would she do with this painful honesty? The answer would change everything. Alexandra didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed next to Oliver, listening to his steady breathing, watching the rise and fall of his chest, and wrestling with the most important decision of their marriage. Her first instinct was rage. Pure, justified anger at his deception, his emotional affair, his decision to air their private struggles to thousands of strangers instead of talking to his actual wife. She could wake him up right now, throw his Reddit posts in his face, and demand explanations for months of lies. Her second instinct was humiliation. What would their friends think? Their families? Her business partners who'd always admired their perfect partnership? The woman who was building a company based on sustainable innovation couldn't even sustain her own marriage. But as the hours passed and her initial shock began to settle, a third emotion emerged: responsibility. Because every confession Oliver had made to Reddit was true. She had become so consumed with building her company that she'd stopped nurturing their relationship. She had treated him like a support system rather than a partner. She had dismissed his projects and dreams while expecting endless enthusiasm for her own. By 6 a.m., Alexandra had made her decision. She wasn't going to ambush Oliver with accusations. She wasn't going to destroy him with anger he probably expected and definitely deserved. Instead, she was going to do something that would either save their marriage or end it cleanly. She was going to tell him the complete truth. That evening, after they'd both finished work and settled into their usual routine, him coding at his desk, her reviewing investor presentations on the couch, Alexandra closed her laptop and broke their comfortable silence. Oliver, we need to talk. And I need you to close your computer and give me your full attention, because what I'm about to say is going to change everything between us. Something in her voice made him immediately stop what he was doing. He turned his chair to face her, and she could see concern building in his eyes. I found your Reddit posts, she said simply. All of them. From the past 6 months. Including the ones about Jessica. The color drained from Oliver's face so quickly that Alexandra thought he might actually pass out. His mouth opened and closed several times before any words came out. Alex, I can explain. No, she interrupted gently. First, I need to tell you something. I'm not angry. This clearly wasn't what he expected. His confusion was visible. I should be furious, she continued. You had an emotional affair. You shared our private problems with strangers. You've been lying to me for months about how you really feel. But Oliver, every single thing you wrote was true. Tears started forming in his eyes. Alex, let me finish. I have become so obsessed with building this company that I forgot to build our marriage. I have treated you like my personal assistant instead of my partner. I have been dismissive of your dreams while expecting you to celebrate every tiny milestone in mine. You didn't just disappear in our relationship. I made you disappear. Now Oliver was crying openly, the kind of tears that come from months of suppressed emotion finally finding release. I love you, he whispered. I've always loved you. I just felt like I was drowning, and I didn't know how to tell you without sounding like I wanted to hold you back. You weren't holding me back, Alexandra said, moving from the couch to sit on the floor in front of his chair. You were trying to save us, and I was too blind to see it. I'm so sorry about Jessica, he said, his voice breaking. Nothing physical happened, but it felt more intimate than what we had here at home, Alexandra finished. I read those posts, Oliver. I understand why it happened. I'm not excusing it, but I understand it. They sat in silence for several minutes, both processing the weight of this complete honesty. So where do we go from here? Oliver finally asked. We start over, Alexandra said firmly. Not our marriage, our communication. Tomorrow, I'm calling a couples therapist. We're going to learn how to have the conversations you've been having with Reddit strangers. We're going to figure out how to support each other's dreams without sacrificing our connection. And my company, she continued, it's successful because I'm driven and focused. But it's meaningless if I lose you in the process. We're going to find a balance that works for both of us, not just for me. Oliver reached down and took her hands. I want to try. I want to fight for this. Good, Alexandra said. Because what we had before wasn't sustainable. But what we're going to build together is going to be unbreakable. That night, they talked until sunrise. Not about logistics or schedules or work problems, but about dreams, fears, and the kind of vulnerable truths that had been missing from their relationship for months. Oliver told her about the coding projects he'd been passionate about, but afraid to share because they seemed insignificant compared to her billion-dollar ambitions. Alexandra told him about the loneliness she felt even in a room full of investors, and how his support had been the foundation that made her brave enough to take risks. They talked about Jessica, the real reasons the emotional connection had developed, and the boundaries they needed to establish moving forward. They talked about their different needs for attention and affection, and how success had changed their dynamic in ways neither of them had acknowledged. Like a building demolished to its foundation, they were tearing down everything that wasn't working so they could rebuild something designed to last. By the time the sun came up, they weren't the same couple who'd gone to bed the night before. They were two people who'd chosen radical honesty over comfortable lies and mutual growth over individual success. The Reddit posts that had threatened to destroy their marriage had become the catalyst for creating something stronger than either of them had believed possible. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but when it did happen, it was spectacular. 3 months after their breakthrough conversation, Alexandra and Oliver had established a completely new rhythm for their relationship. Tuesday and Thursday evenings were sacred. No work calls, no emails, no distractions. Just 2 hours of focused conversation about everything except business logistics. They called it real talk time, and it became the foundation that allowed everything else to flourish. But what surprised Alexandra most was how fixing their relationship actually accelerated her professional success rather than slowing it down. When you're not carrying the emotional weight of a failing marriage, when you're not second-guessing whether your partner truly supports your ambitions, when you have someone who's genuinely invested in your success rather than just managing the fallout from it, your capacity for everything else expands exponentially. Within 6 months of their Reddit revelation, Alexandra's sustainable tech company had attracted the attention of major venture capital firms. Her innovation in renewable energy storage systems had caught the eye of investors who weren't just looking for profitable returns, but for technologies that could actually reshape entire industries. The first major breakthrough came when her team developed a battery storage solution that could maintain renewable energy efficiency at 94%, a number that had previously been considered impossible. The technology wasn't just innovative, it was revolutionary. We've been tracking your company for 2 years, the lead investor from Meridian Capital told her during their first meeting. But what impressed us wasn't just your technology. It was your leadership style. You've built a team that's not just talented, they're devoted. That kind of loyalty doesn't happen by accident. What he didn't know was that Alexandra's leadership transformation had started at home. Learning to truly listen to Oliver, to balance her ambitions with genuine partnership, to lead with both strength and vulnerability. Those skills had completely changed how she managed her team, how she approached investor relationships, and how she positioned her company in the market. Oliver, meanwhile, was experiencing his own renaissance. With their communication issues resolved and his emotional needs being met, he threw himself back into his passion projects with renewed energy. He started developing apps focused on social impact, technology that could help nonprofits manage resources more effectively, platforms that connected volunteers with meaningful opportunities, systems that made sustainable living more accessible to everyday people. You know what's incredible? He told Alexandra one evening as they cooked dinner together, another new ritual they'd established. For months, I felt like my work didn't matter because it wasn't making millions like yours. But now I realize we're both building things that make the world better. We're just doing it differently. This shift in Oliver's confidence had an unexpected effect on their relationship dynamic. Instead of feeling threatened by Alexandra's success, he became genuinely proud of being married to someone whose ambitions matched his own values. He started talking about her company with the same enthusiasm she showed for his projects. When Alexandra's second round of funding brought in $50 million, Oliver threw her a celebration party where he gave a toast that brought everyone to tears. "I married the most brilliant woman I've ever met, but more importantly, I married someone who uses that brilliance to make tomorrow better than today." Alex doesn't just build companies, she builds the future. The investors at that party later said Oliver's genuine pride and authentic partnership was one of the factors that convinced them Alexandra wasn't just a talented CEO, but someone with the personal stability to handle the pressures of massive growth. And growth came fast. Within 18 months, Alexandra's company had expanded from 12 employees to over 200. Her renewable energy storage systems were being implemented by major corporations. Her innovations were being discussed in environmental policy meetings, and her name was appearing on lists of the most influential young entrepreneurs in America. But the real transformation was in how she wielded that power. The old Alexandra had been driven by proving herself, by hitting metrics, by achieving recognition. The new Alexandra was driven by impact, both in her business and in her relationship. She made decisions based on long-term sustainability rather than short-term wins. She prioritized building systems that could grow without breaking rather than achieving rapid growth that required constant crisis management. "You've changed," her business partner Marcus told her after a particularly successful board meeting. 6 months ago, you would have pushed for that aggressive expansion timeline. Now you're thinking 3 moves ahead instead of just reacting to opportunities. What Marcus didn't realize was that learning to think strategically about her marriage had taught Alexandra to think strategically about everything. The skills required to rebuild trust, to balance competing priorities, to communicate with complete honesty even when it's uncomfortable. Those same skills made her an exponentially better CEO. Oliver began to see a side of his wife that even he hadn't fully appreciated. Not just her intelligence or her drive, but her capacity for leadership that inspired genuine loyalty rather than demanding it. "I used to think you were successful because you were smarter than everyone else," he told her one night as they walked through their neighborhood. Another ritual they'd established to stay connected despite their busy schedules. "But now I see that you're successful because you make everyone around you better, including me." This wasn't just romantic flattery. Oliver had started his own consulting business, focusing on helping other tech companies develop apps with social impact. His client list was growing rapidly, and he credited Alexandra's leadership example with giving him the confidence to position himself as an expert rather than just a service provider. But the most significant change was in their power dynamic as a couple. Alexandra was no longer the high-achieving wife with the supportive husband. She had become the irreplaceable partner, someone whose success enhanced their relationship rather than threatening it, whose ambition inspired Oliver's growth rather than diminishing it, whose leadership at work translated into leadership in their partnership. When Alexandra was invited to speak at the Global Innovation Summit, one of the most prestigious technology conferences in the world, Oliver didn't just attend as her supportive spouse. He was genuinely excited to be there, proud to be associated with her success, and confident enough in his own achievements to hold meaningful conversations with other attendees rather than just standing quietly by her side. If this story is resonating with you, make sure you're subscribed for more incredible transformation stories. Because what Alexandra accomplished next would cement her position as not just a successful CEO, but as a woman who had mastered the art of being irreplaceable in every area of her life. The Reddit confession that had once threatened to destroy their marriage had become the catalyst for creating both a billion-dollar company and an unshakable partnership. But Alexandra's most impressive achievement wasn't her net worth. It was becoming the kind of person Oliver couldn't imagine living without, personally or professionally. But let's be completely honest here, because real transformation isn't a fairy tale with a perfect ending. It's messy, ongoing work that requires constant attention and occasional course corrections. 2 years after the Reddit discovery, Alexandra and Oliver had built something stronger than their original marriage, but they hadn't erased the past. Some days were still harder than others. There were moments when Alexandra would catch Oliver on his phone and feel that familiar knot in her stomach, wondering if he was seeking emotional connection elsewhere again. Most of the time, he was just checking work emails or scrolling through completely innocent content, but the hypervigilance was real. "I hate that I still have these moments," she confided to their therapist during one of their monthly check-in sessions, a commitment they'd maintained even after their relationship stabilized. "I trust him completely now, but my nervous system sometimes doesn't get the memo." Oliver understood this completely because he had his own version of the same struggle. When Alexandra worked late or seemed particularly absorbed in a business crisis, part of him still feared becoming invisible again. Even though their communication had transformed dramatically, even though she now made deliberate effort to include him in her professional excitement, the old fear sometimes surfaced. "It's like having a scar," their therapist had explained. "The wound has healed, but the tissue is different now. More sensitive. That doesn't mean it's weak. Sometimes scar tissue is actually stronger than the original skin. But it requires different care." They'd learned to talk about these moments without shame or defensiveness. When Alexandra felt triggered by Oliver's phone usage, she'd simply say, "I'm having a Reddit moment," and he'd understand immediately. He'd show her what he was looking at, or put the phone away entirely, or just acknowledge that her feelings were valid even if they weren't currently necessary. When Oliver felt himself starting to feel secondary to her business demands, he'd say, "I need some CEO wife attention," which was their code for requesting focus time together. Alexandra had learned to respond to these requests as business priorities rather than personal inconveniences. Their couples therapy sessions had evolved from crisis management to performance optimization. They weren't fixing problems anymore. They were fine-tuning a system that worked well but could always work better. "Most couples wait until they're in crisis to seek help," Dr. Rodriguez had told them. "You two have learned to use therapy like preventive medicine. That's why your relationship not only survived but thrived." The professional demands on Alexandra had continued to intensify. Her company was now valued at over $800 million. She was fielding acquisition offers from major corporations, and her schedule included speaking engagements, board meetings, and strategic planning sessions that would have consumed her completely in the past. But she'd learned to manage success differently. Instead of letting achievements create distance, she used them to strengthen her connection with Oliver. When she received the Forbes 30 Under 30 recognition, her first call wasn't to her publicist or her investors. It was to Oliver. When major corporations started approaching her about partnerships, she discussed the strategic implications with him during their evening walks. When she was invited to join the advisory board of a major environmental foundation, she asked for his input on how to balance the time commitment with their relationship priorities. Oliver's own business had grown significantly. His social impact consulting firm now worked with nonprofits across the country, and he'd been featured in several industry publications for his innovative approach to technology-driven social change. But more importantly, he'd learned to share his professional excitement with Alexandra in ways that invited her genuine engagement rather than polite support. They'd established what they called win sharing, a ritual where they each took time to fully celebrate the other's achievements. Not just congratulations, but genuine curiosity about the process, the challenges, and the significance of each success. "I think we're better partners now than we were when we first fell in love," Oliver told Alexandra on their third wedding anniversary. An anniversary they celebrated very differently than the distracted dinner from 2 years earlier. "We're definitely more intentional," Alexandra agreed. "Back then, we just assumed love was enough. Now we know love is the foundation, but partnership requires skill." Their relationship had become a source of professional strength rather than personal stress. Alexandra made better business decisions because she had a trusted partner to process complex situations with. Oliver took bigger risks with his own ventures because he felt supported rather than overshadowed. The emotional affair with Jessica had become ancient history, but its lessons remained relevant. They'd learned to recognize the early signs of emotional distance, to address needs before they became problems, and to maintain the kind of intimate communication that prevents outside relationships from filling gaps in their marriage. "We're not perfect," Alexandra said during a recent interview where she was asked about balancing entrepreneurial success with personal relationships. "But we're committed to growing together rather than growing apart. That commitment has made both of our professional lives more sustainable and more meaningful." The scars from their crisis had indeed made them stronger, but they required ongoing attention. Their love story wasn't about perfection. It was about two people who chose each other again and again, even when choosing each other required changing themselves. 3 years later, Alexandra stood on the main stage at TechWorld Global, looking out at an audience of 15,000 entrepreneurs, investors, and innovators from around the world. Her company had just been acquired by a major corporation for $1.2 billion, making her one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the sustainable technology sector. But as she began her keynote speech about building success that sustains, her mind flashed back to that night when she discovered Oliver's Reddit confessions while sitting alone in her living room, feeling like her perfect life was crashing down around her. "Success without connection is just expensive loneliness," she told the audience. "I learned this the hard way when I almost lost the most important partnership of my life while chasing professional achievements that felt meaningless without someone to share them with." In the VIP section, Oliver watched his wife command the attention of thousands of people and felt nothing but pure pride. Not the complicated mixture of admiration and resentment from their early years, but genuine excitement about being married to someone whose impact on the world matched her impact on his personal growth. After her speech, as they walked to the after-party together, Oliver squeezed her hand. "You know what I realized listening to you up there? You didn't just become a CEO I can't afford to lose professionally. You became the woman I can't imagine existing without, period." And that was the real transformation. Alexandra hadn't manipulated her way into becoming irreplaceable. She hadn't used his guilt about the Reddit posts to gain power over him. Instead, she'd become genuinely indispensable by mastering the art of leading with both strength and vulnerability, in business and in love. She was the CEO who made billion-dollar decisions with the confidence of someone whose personal foundation was unshakable. She was the partner who could celebrate Oliver's achievements without feeling threatened, support his dreams without losing sight of her own, and love him fully without sacrificing her ambition. The Reddit confession that could have ended their marriage had instead become the catalyst for creating the kind of partnership that enhanced everything else in their lives. Oliver's moment of digital betrayal had forced them both to confront uncomfortable truths about success, attention, and what it really means to be present in a relationship. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never found those posts," Alexandra mused as they rode home from the conference. "We probably would have stayed married," Oliver replied thoughtfully. "But we would have stayed stuck. Comfortable but disconnected. Successful but not really thriving together. And now I feel like we're building something that gets stronger every year instead of just maintaining something that worked well enough." Their story had become proof that crisis doesn't have to mean catastrophe. That discovering your partner's hidden struggles can become an opportunity for deeper intimacy rather than relationship destruction. That professional success and personal fulfillment don't have to compete if you're willing to do the work of conscious partnership. Alexandra's billion-dollar exit wasn't just a business achievement. It was the result of someone who'd learned to integrate all aspects of her life rather than sacrificing relationships for ambition. Her company succeeded because she developed the leadership skills that come from truly understanding how to motivate, inspire, and connect with the people who matter most. What would you do if you found your partner's secret confessions online? Would you let discovery become destruction? Or would you use painful honesty as the foundation for building something unbreakable? Have you ever turned a relationship crisis into a success story? Have you experienced that moment when the thing that almost destroyed you became the catalyst for your greatest growth? Like this video if you believe in the power of second chances and the possibility of transforming betrayal into breakthrough. Because sometimes our darkest moments are actually doorways to our most powerful selves. Subscribe for more stories of incredible life transformations that prove it's possible to rebuild stronger than before. Share this with someone who needs to hear that marriage crises don't have to become marriage casualties. They can become opportunities for unprecedented growth. And remember, true power in any relationship isn't about control or manipulation. It's about becoming someone whose growth enhances everyone around them, whose success creates more success for the people they love, and whose presence makes life better for everyone lucky enough to be close to them. Alexandra became the CEO Oliver couldn't afford to lose. Not because she held his past mistakes over him, but because she transformed herself into a woman whose love, leadership, and partnership made his entire life more meaningful. That's what real power looks like. That's what irreplaceable actually means.